um, send this out afterwards. But hello, welcome to our, I think this is our 11th or 12th of these events. We do these leadership summits quarterly. And the topic today is knowing your why, how wardens can remove barriers to change. Um, and then I am not controlling the slide, Hortensia, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. In case anyone doesn't know about the Great Wardens Project, I'd love to be able to just talk a little bit about what we're about. So we provide mentorship and training to develop bold prison leaders and build a corrections culture based on safety and dignity. Our core beliefs on the next slide here. Wardens and superintendents have a responsibility to promote safe, secure, and healthy correctional facilities, and that advocates and prison leaders can work together to reimagine how corrections facilities operate and shape a new generation of committed corrections professionals. So I'm on that advocacy side of the fence. We've been doing the Great Wardens Project for several years now, and we've been able to really, I think, find a lot of common ground between, advocacy work and corrections work, and also recognizing the differences as well. But I think it's really kind of proof that such partnerships are possible. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done and will continue to do. I want to highlight, if you go on to the next slide, I want to highlight our guest speakers for today. We have Mr. Warden, or I'm sorry, not Warden. I've demoted him by accident. Mr. Joe Page, if you could tell me what your title actually is, bring yourself up so that I'm not bringing you down with my misdetails here. If you want to introduce yourself,
Superintendent of Pine Bluff Complex, Arkansas
there
Division
you
of
go.
Corrections.
And that's not it, right? Like you're doing a lot of you're involved in
hmm
a lot of stuff outside of your role. If you want to talk a little bit about some of the other work that you're involved in.
I'm on the board of governors for ACA, second term. I'm the president-elect for NAWS, North American Association of Wards and Superintendents. I take over as president in August. I'm on Great Wardens Project. I'm on the task force. We started this out as just a conversation. It seems like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's led into the mentorship process. This was all a dream we had with these quarterly breakout sessions and giving wardens around the nation a forum to where they can reach out and talk with like-minded people and solve problems without feeling like you're in a box and
Mm-hmm.
can't reach anybody where you're at.
100%. That is like exactly the point of what we're trying to do is to create spaces for corrections leaders, whether you're a warden, a superintendent, deputy warden, or even if you're not in those positions, but you still are in a leadership role, to be able to give spaces for those folks to connect with each other, to learn from each other, to lean on each other. And that's the intention of our conversation today as well. Unfortunately, we haven't been joined with Mr. Capper has not joined us. He's having some challenges today. We're hoping that he'll be able to join us a little later, and we'll be able to get his wisdom as well. And if you want to move to the next slide, we also have are hoping that Miss Deborah Wolford will be able to join us. She's also having some technical challenges. So it may just be Joe and I today, and of course the rest of you, but there I am, your humble host. My name is Jessica. I'm a senior program director with Just Attention International. And I want to highlight too that we've got members of our task force, as Joe mentioned. If you want to move to the next slide, these are the folks that are really sort of the voices of corrections leaders that influence everything that we do, that have provided so much wisdom to me and to others. And I just really want to highlight who those folks are here. And if getting involved in this work is something that you're interested in, I'd love to hear from folks who want to maybe get more involved, whether that's, potentially joining the task force or presenting with me at a future summit, getting more involved in the conversation. I'm going to put my email address here in the chat. You're always welcome to reach out. And I'll also say too that we, the folks that are on our task force here have made themselves available for their colleagues, their friends out in the field. And so oftentimes I'll put people in touch with members of our task force to help with a particular issue, or some specific thing that's going on. So that sort of mentorship or that camaraderie is available as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out if that resonates with you. Now, we've been doing this Zoom stuff for a long time. Next slide, please. Um, However, in case it's been a while, or you need a little bit of a refresher at the bottom of your screen, there's a mute. Feel free to unmute yourself at any time. As Joe mentioned, these are really conversations, these are discussions that we're hoping to have. And so we really want to hear from you. And I think your colleagues also want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from me, they want to hear from you. So go ahead and unmute yourself. If you can turn your video on, that's great. If not, totally fine. And then also feel free to use the chat function, to enter in any questions. If you don't want to unmute yourself or whatever, we'll be keeping tabs on the chat for any questions or any contributions to the conversation. We want to make sure that your voice gets heard. Speaking of which, next slide, there's a couple other ways that you can get involved here. If you want to raise your hand, there's a little reactions button right there where you can raise your hand and you can let me know, oh, I've got something to say, so I can make sure to call on you. Right. Next slide. All right. So the quote of the day, this is one of those quotes that I have grounded myself in as I'm doing this work. And it's one of those that I don't know who said it. I can't attribute it. But strong leaders are defined by their ability to see beyond what is and toward what's possible. Joe, what do you think about that? Does that sum up to you what being a strong leader means?
Yes, in leadership, often you're challenged with staying the course. You're challenged with implementing new actions and things that are unpopular to people. You're challenged with carrying out disciplinary actions that are unpopular. And I think that kind of sums that up pretty good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that brings me to my first question for you, Joe, and then also for our folks that are in the audience here. Why are you a corrections leader? Like what brought you to this role? Why do you stay in this role? What is your why, Mr. Joe Page?
Well, my why is being a leader of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think they say sometimes leaders are born or they're raised or vice versa.
Mm.
Uh, I think a lot of people, like I know myself, I know of Mr. Earl that's on the call. I've been around him since we were on undergraduate college together, and it's a leadership. Some people are just born into leadership. It's kind of hard to explain, but those of you on this call that know you were always that friend that your friends came to for advice, or on your sports team you took the initiative, or out of you and your siblings, you're the one that your parents always could depend on. Things of that nature, they just manifest and they continue to grow. And then you understand your why and you understand your pleasure of seeing things run successful, seeing people safely. Um, like I tell my staff all the time in these classes I teach, I don't have all the answers, but I teach tools. So if I'm teaching you a hammer today, you're not going to use that to fix something that needs a pair of pliers. But those things that we teach, you can pull them out of that toolbox, and you need those separate tools. And I believe as you have that innate ability as an individual to understand what gives you pleasure in that, that's what helps you with leadership, and that's what helps me. Seeing people grow, planning for succession, seeing people tell me, "I want your job." That doesn't offend me, but somebody say they want my job. But what I tell them is, what level of education do you have? How hard are you willing to work? I don't mind. I'm not. I don't feel inferior or anything by you saying you want my job. I want you to want my job. That means if you want my job and you're going to work to get my job, that means that's one less person I got to worry about coming to work, doing the job, doing what they're supposed to do because they're striving to be better. And I'm not going to be here all the ways blocking that spot up. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. Then I'll get out the way and then keep bringing on the people that we brought along. But that's what does it for me.
Love it.
Well, for
And
me,
please,
this
you knew
is
exactly where I was
Naira
going,
from Nevada.
Gabriella. Go for it.
For me, you'll have two types of people. You're either the leader or the follower. In this type of setting, it's really easy to kind of go down and just become a follower. And I think that when you're passionate about what you do and you can share your wisdom, it's a lot better. There's some type of self-satisfaction. I've been doing this for 22 years. And that's what keeps me moving. I like to teach, I like to share. I think that when you're passionate about what you do, you can be a better leader too.
I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd love to hear from anyone else who's with us. Like what is your why? Why are you a corrections leader? Miss
Well,
Earl,
I can
please
just
go for it.
chime in on some of the things that have pushed me to be a corrections. It's just from past experiences, knowing what corrections can be if more people took corrections serious. Even in our leadership roles, if we push people outside of their comfort zones for them to be better, corrections will be a better place all the way around. We get in our comfort zones in corrections. We listen to people do a lot of talking in corrections. I share some with people all the time. There's two types of people in this world, talkers and doers. You will let me know which one you're going to be. So I take that as, if they're talking, they talking to cover something up. If they doing, that means they putting forth that effort to get some things completed to make things better. So in that leadership role, being a leader in corrections has pushed me outside of my comfort zone to be better, do better, and continue to learn. As a leader, if I'm showing my staff that I'm continually learning, getting on Zoom calls, going to different conferences, going outside of Arkansas, period, to learn and do different things, I call myself being an example for others to follow. So that pushes me to be a leader in corrections, do what they say couldn't be done. So that keeps me going in corrections as a leader.
Love it. Anyone else? What's your why?
This is Delinia. I think my why is I've always grown up, my family in service. So for me, this career is a passion, and I would probably be doing something involved in restorative justice if it wasn't this line and this path. I did have an extensive career prior to crossing over to custody in as a community resource manager in California, responsible for all rehabilitative offerings, religious offerings. And so this isn't just a job for me. This is what I've been called to do. And I am an adjunct professor for the community college system in California. And I teach correctional administration. And we've been doing corrections for the same way since the 1800s. It didn't work then and it doesn't work now. So I think insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Yeah. And so I like to think outside the box or create a whole different box. And some of the things I do are looked at a little questionable because it's not the norm. But I always do things with safety and security in mind, but understanding that our goal is not to be the punisher. Our goal is to ensure rehabilitation, transformation, trauma, restoration, and to put the 96% of the people who are coming back to our neighborhoods in California back on the right track as positive, productive citizens. And whatever wrong was done to them that caused them to go that path, let's try to right those wrongs. So this is something I wake up before the alarm every day because I see change. I can see it, especially at a women's institution. Men are a little more guarded. They don't like to let you know when you're breaking through to them. But at the women's institution, I can see the change. I can see the behavior change. And I'm walk and talk to the population, and they know I'm there for them. And they can believe what I say. I'm not going to overcommit, but when Ms. Lewis says it, it's going to get done. And I see that they reciprocate by changing the behavior and changing their attitude and having more of a focus on their future. So that's what I do it for.
I really appreciate what you said too about that reciprocation, that sort of really understanding that there's a relationship that happens with the way staff interact with incarcerated people and the way incarcerated people then react to staff, that it's reciprocal. I think that's a really a wise observation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
One of the things, Ms. Jessica, that I looked at too, even in the correctional leadership, we don't push, with staff to read outside of correctional material. When we talk about different leadership books, examples of good leaders, we have a lot of leaders out there with so much information on books they have written on how this leadership style was successful for them. And I believe we don't push that enough as leaders. So when you talk about change, what I heard Ms. Lewis just talk about there, you know, that can push you on that outside rim where everybody frown upon you because you're trying to bring change as a leader. And for most leaders, that's hard to deal with. So when you're talking about bringing forth change, trying to do something different, you got to have the heart as a leader to push that change. And I believe what we're lacking now, correct, is strong leaders that's going to push whatever it takes to make that difference. Because you're going to get so much negative feedback when you're trying to do something different from what they were doing in the 80s, 90s. If it's not going to work now, just because it worked in the 80s and 90s, we always talk about how corrections changes every day, every year, every month. So I believe a lot of leaders, you know, a lot of them get pushed on, getting pushed against. I believe that'll get a lot of leaders to push forward when people are not accepting of change. And you know, and that's one of the big things as a leader. I believe that what keeps me going also is willing to fight for what is right.
Mm.
You know, especially why our new generation of staff that's coming in, quit blaming them as being the problem, but it's adapting to their style of learning what we need to adapt to. So I believe that continue to push me as a leader as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's almost like you saw these slides before, and I know you did it, but it's almost like you did because you're hitting a lot of those talking points that are coming up later on. Thank you so much. I wanna play just a really short video for you all, and this is a video of corrections leaders talking about the light bulb moment for them when they realized that their work, I think, was turning into a career, like that was mentioned before, what that difference is. So let's get this played. It's just a few minutes. Let us know if there's any audio issues or anything like that.
I was with probation parole for a little over 5 years before I really realized what my role was. You can imagine having a badge, a gun, a taser, pepper spray, a baton, 2 sets of cuffs, and 60 rounds of ammunition. I didn't perceive my role for the first 5 years as a helper. My role was, I'm going to protect the public by enforcing the rules. It took me a while, but I realized I can do both.
But I think too often we don't realize or take into account that over 90% of those are going to be released someday. So we have a tremendous responsibility to make a positive impact during the time they're with us, to not only reduce recidivism and ensure that the folks that get out of prison don't come back, but by doing that, we reduce future victimization. So our public safety role goes far beyond our time with individuals inside the fence. And you know, I remember when that transition in my thinking occurred, and I think that's just tremendously important that our officers understand that.
Corrections work is difficult on the best of days, and working inside that correctional environment can be very hard on a person. It's tough. You know, I've heard corrections directors talk about when the light clicked with them about really, you know, the true mission of corrections, and someone who, like myself, started, you know, over 30 years ago as a correctional officer, I can remember working in the facilities every day, in the security ranks, in the treatment ranks, as an administrator, as a warden at a facility, and never really, that true mission of corrections never really clicked with me until I was at the administrative level in central office. And why is that? You know, I think you're in that crisis moment every day, fighting crisis, the crisis management, and dealing with the struggles that you deal with in the correctional environment. And you just don't think out the why of what we're doing. You're looking at the what you do every day. And it's challenging, but we need to help people who turn the key each day, who provide the services each day, to really understand the long game about the day that this person will go home and be a productive citizen versus someone who goes out, re-victimizes someone, and comes back to our custody.
I'd love to know if that resonated with anyone here. Like, did anyone have kind of that aha moment or that light bulb moment where their idea of what the role was kind of shifted, and what was that, Mr. Earl? I'm seeing you nod your head. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I can go back to when I had an officer killed in the line of duty as a young major. And that was my light bulb moment on what I need to push for as a correctional leader. And I believe that has pushed me more every year to be better, make sure the people around me are safe, to make sure we're implementing the tools for them to be safe. So I believe that was really, it was a hard light bulb moment, but it was a moment that changed my correctional journey for forever. And that right now has been over 10 years ago. So that just really changed everything for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. So what about you? Was there a light bulb moment for you where your idea of your role kind of shifted like that?
Can you repeat the question? I have some issues on this connection.
Oh, sorry. I was asking whether you whether the idea of having like that light bulb moment where you realize, oh, my role is different than what I thought it was. Did you have a moment like that in your career? And if so, what was it?
My light bulb moment was in 2009 when I made deputy warden, and I had 5 years of experience in, and up until that point, every day um, it was putting out the fires. I worked Earl and I were in the East Building dealing with ASEG, which is restrictive. They send restrictive housing now, turn out inmates. We're the only ones in the state that really did that, other than a couple other places. And nationally, that's kind of a forgotten trend, but we turned out the bad guys. So every day, our job was to get them up, turn them out, deal with them, whether it was fighting or hard knocks, whatever it was. And we tell those stories now and act like we've been around for 40 years. So it wasn't that long ago when the bad guys that everybody's afraid of now, we opened the door at 4 in the morning and said, go get in your squad. And that seems like it was a dinosaur thing or something. So when I made deputy warden, that's when one of my mentors, John Maples, kind of brought me in and said, okay, you're used to having a lot of meat on your plate. Now you got to put some vegetables on your plate.
Mm.
And I said, I don't know about you, but there's nothing wrong with ribs and brisket to me. But he said, now I want you less hands on. Now, if you're down there and something's happening to them, I don't expect you to turn and don't respond. He said, but now you need to put more vegetables on your plate. And that translated to what I am now and how I operate now and how I listen to things now and the way we develop things now is that's the vegetables on my plate. I can't just um, walk down a hill and get one. You got to be like the wise old bull and walk down the hill. So that's made me better and I guess more seasoned because now when they say things, I've never been really quick to anger, but I was more ready to let's go get it. Let's go take care of it. Now it's more of a okay. Well, I can't control what's already happened, but I can prevent it from happening again. But what's the best way to take a move towards resolving this? And that's at that time, 5 years in, that was my okay. Let me ask a couple more questions. Let me not just let's go get them. Let's go. That energy's still there, and like the Mr. Earl you see right now, that's the reformed, distinguished, educated father, husband. That's who you see now. That's not who was one of my corporals when I was a sergeant.
Oh, no.
It was let's go open the door. And we waited for that. I'm not going to work. Oh, yes, you're going out. You're coming out to sell. And they came, we were undefeated. They didn't start taking L's till we left right there. We were undefeated. So, but now you see a distinguished gentleman sitting there that's deep in thought and I call it the beard of all knowledge and power. Hey,
Reading books on
it's,
leadership.
he has some seasoning on him. I'm not talking about cabbages, you know what I'm saying? So that's what those aha moments do. It did it for me. I was a deputy warden at Varner when he was a major East Arkansas when Miss Esther lost her life. And when they called me and told me they were sending them to me at Varner, I received them, so I remember that day like it was yesterday when he had to deal with that as a young major and I was deputy warden at another unit. They received him because we had death row over there. And he got sent over there with those guys. So those things change you. They change how we think. But I think part of that light bulb moment is not letting go of that fire. I think it's keeping that fire, but at the same time, like Mr. Maples told me, I need to put a little more lettuce and vegetables on my plate, not just all meat.
The food pyramid. We gotta diversify what's on our plate. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right. And a link to the video we played just got put in the chat there if anyone wants to be able to save that and send that to anyone else. But I stumbled across this very recent op-ed written by Dan Kingery, who's the Executive Vice President of Correctional Advancement at Prison Fellowship. And I'm not going to read all this to everyone, but I do want to highlight just one statement that is said here, right, on this second little paragraph here. He says, while leadership does have access to new learning programs, they focus primarily on management strategies, such as how to count 1,000 people in 15 minutes or options for intervention if there's a hunger strike. But opportunities to learn about shifting prison culture in ways significant enough to solve understaffing problems are few and far between. Is this something that resonates with anyone, that the sort of learning programs that are available for corrections leaders are so focused on nitty-gritty operational stuff and not so much focused on these bigger picture sort of vision, culture, these more nuanced things? Is that something that you all have experienced too in your work? And Joe, I'll start with you, but that's open to anybody, of course.
Absolutely. I think that when you change the way you do things, instead of just focusing on the everyday operational trainings, you start teaching your staff and start pretty much giving them, empowering them. Because if you empower them and you make them feel appreciated, they, most likely are going to go ahead and buy in to a lot of the stuff and a lot of the changes that go on in all of the correctional settings, and at that point, you're going to be able to keep a lot of that staff. A lot of the staff, don't want to work in corrections, like you said earlier. It could be a little challenging, to work in this type of setting. But I think that if you empower your staff and you show them appreciation and you kind of work on that, it's going to be a lot easier for them to buy in and for us to be able to keep staff. Because the understaffing problems is ridiculous. It becomes a huge problem, and I think all of us can agree on that. People call in, we don't have now we're mandating officers to stay longer shifts. That becomes a problem because now they're having problems at home because of that. So it's like a ripple effect when we do that. But I think that if we go ahead and lay a really good, solid foundation and work that way, it's going to be a lot easier. Seems like a lot of correctional systems do everything backwards. And I see that's the problem.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that the understaffing issue or crisis, if you will, is underlines, I think, every conversation that we're having as a part of this project. And every conversation I'm having with corrections leaders, there's this sort of underlying, like, all of this is related to the really serious staffing crisis that so many departments and facilities are dealing with right now. There's this kind of like reckoning that's happening, and I think that makes it even more important to be sure to dedicate some time to having these kinds of conversations and really unpacking these things. Absolutely. One of the things, next slide, please. One of the things that was really kind of the foundation of a lot of the reason why this project even started was this idea that the expectation that a warden or a superintendent has all the power in the world and can do anything they want and implement any change they want. And that was kind of coming, in conflict with the reality that a lot of wardens and superintendents actually don't have, the kind of authority that a lot of people may assume that they do. And so rather than doing a formal poll here, I'll just ask folks whether or not you feel you are empowered to make changes necessary to improve your facility culture, or do you feel like there's just so many barriers that get in the way that you don't have that kind of empowerment that you wish you did to make changes?
Well, I feel like I do have the power to make those changes as a superintendent here at the Wrightsville complex. But with the barriers that you run into, you must understand how money works in corrections. You got to understand the budgets. You got to understand legislative approvals. You got to understand, staying within that budget, your full operations on how much money goes towards that full operations. It can actual money be allocated for different things. Understanding that full process of budgeting, having that relationship built with our budget administrator, our chief financial officer, so they can explain a lot of different things to you. Have that gall enough to, go to meetings to discuss different things on what is needed. Create game plans to show how much money it will cost for this to be actually completed. And also come up with ways of how to fit this in your next budget and ask for further funding to actually complete the things you need to improve the culture at your facility. So understanding those processes, I believe, a lot of people have the power, but putting in the actual extra work it takes to show why the different changes are needed. I believe that's why a lot of us fail at as leaders. We're not willing to put in that extra mile to show why it is needed and show the actual product, the actual report to show the effectiveness of, show some data on how it can actually improve your facility.
Measures.
So I believe that's why a lot of ways why we drop the ball and not willing to go the extra mile to show why it's needed. Don't be intimidated when I have to go speak for, on the Senate, the legislators about why this money is needed and actually will get people to take you serious about the change that you're trying to make.
Absolutely. And if we can go to the next slide, please. This was actually a question that we asked in a survey in spring 2021, which feels like 100 years ago and yesterday, all at the same time. But we sent out a survey to wardens and superintendents across the country. We asked them this question, and as you can see here, like the majority, the vast majority, either somewhat or strongly agreed that they feel they are empowered to make the kind of changes necessary to improve their facility culture. And so I think there can sometimes be this disconnect between like the messages we receive about we can't do this, we can't do that, we don't have the money, we don't have the, and I think that kind of gets into your brain and it makes you feel like, oh, I don't have any control, I don't have any power, I don't have any ability. Whereas maybe the reality is that there are things, there are plenty of ways that, as corrections leaders, you can make changes navigating around these kinds of barriers that we're talking about. And that's really leading us to the meat of our conversation, if you will hear next slide, please, is that we hear from time and time again that a lot of corrections leaders feel like they're in the middle, right? They've got these internal barriers, whether that's things like staff buy-in that already came up, limited resources internally, and then there's the external barriers, the sort of mandates that are coming from up high, sort of political realities, pressures, things from administration coming down, policies, all these things, and that you all are kind of in the middle, having to navigate both in and out these barriers. I don't know if anyone feels like there's a particular either external or internal barrier that they found the most challenging, or if it's sort of like everything's really challenging. I don't know if this resonates with folks. Do you feel like you're in the middle?
So this is Delinia. One of the largest barriers I think we have in California is we have a very strong correctional peace officers union. Mm-hmm. And so I think the department is open and ready to move forward and change the whole culture. But you have these union folks who are kind of dug in a little bit. Mm. And there's always that layer, and then we have to take it all the way up to a table in Sacramento and bring it back down. And sometimes that diminishes the energy and the initial fire to get those things done when it takes so long and that bureaucracy, Now, of course, at the end of the day, we end up winning, but then, it's kind of like the wind is out of your sails sometimes. So that's a little bit difficult, I find, in California.
Next slide, please. I think some of the resistance that I hear from that corrections leaders tell me about, and this is really related to the kind of staff buy-in stuff that we know is so challenging, that these four sort of resistances or barriers are the ones that we hear folks struggling with the most. And I think that first one, that cynicism, that'll never work, right? I think that because the work of corrections is so challenging, I think it's only human to be faced with so many barriers and to get a little cynical about it, right? I think especially if you've been in the field for a really long time, you hear about this new program or that new something, and you realize, oh, but nothing's ever going to change, right? Like that kind of attitude, I think, is really difficult to work through. There's of course the fear of like, what if this makes things worse, right? Or what if this creates safety concerns? What if this makes my job more dangerous? I think one thing that folks don't want to acknowledge impacts them, but again, we're all human, is just that peer pressure of like, if my colleagues and the people that are like on the line with me think this is a bad idea, why am I going to get behind this, right? Like, why am I going to put my neck out on the line if everyone else around me is telling me this is not going to work? And then I think another one of the biggest issues, and this was kind of touched on a little earlier too, is that complacency of like, well, the way we've always done things. This is what we're used to, right? This is just the way it is. Do these, and I know I keep like saying I see people nodding, but I'm going to interpret that as a, yep, I have experienced this, or I've seen this. How do you as a corrections leader navigate through some of these nuanced and very real sort of internal resistances to change? What are some of the things that you all have found to be successful? Or maybe what has not been successful? Maybe that's the better question, because these are really hard barriers, right? Like, this is really deep rooted stuff. So I totally understand that sort of silence of like, ooh, this is tough. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts they'd like to share on this, navigating these barriers.
Hey,
Well,
this is Marcin.
Please.
I guess what I've seen in the past is with change, I think inclusion goes a long way. I think just getting staff together from, different ranks, supervisor all the way down to, boots on the ground, the officers and support staff, getting their input, talking about it, kind of answering the questions as they come up seems to work best for me. When it comes to implementing change, and of course you'll have the certain percentage of staff that will, they will not understand or have their buy-in no matter what, and that usually you kind of nailed it. It's usually the staff who have some significant time on the job that just again will not accept any change. However, inclusion, having, open conversations about the change seems to have worked the best for me in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you also saw these slides ahead of time, but you're like right on the money here. Next slide, please, Hortensia. This this was a correctional officer wellness survey, and this is included in the resources towards the end of the slide. This is something I would recommend everyone take a look at. These were sort of the identified primary sources of stress for corrections officers in this literature review that was done. And one of the ones you can see right there is that lack of trust in management and no input in decision making. And I think that's exactly what you were talking about, right? Is like, you're not going to help your cause if you're making decisions that are going to impact your team without getting their input, without getting their thoughts, without getting their concerns, all of that. And you can see here some of these other sources of stress that I think you all would understand, that sort of exposure to violence on a daily basis, that code of silence, that peer pressure thing that we talked about, lack of training and lack of support, the public perceptions, the way the public perceives your facility, your agency, or just corrections overall, general work-life balance stuff. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but I think that what's within the control of a corrections leader is, as you said, to be including your people in these decisions, in these conversations, in getting from them what are their thoughts, what are their ideas, what are their concerns, and making sure that they're feeling heard, right, as these changes sort of come through. I think the other piece on this that I want to hone in on is the role ambiguity. And if we can actually go to the next slide here, this is taken directly from the study that is linked into the chat right here, that a lot of correction officers feel that their professional responsibilities are ambiguous or even at times contradictory. So that idea of like, am I here to punish people or am I here to rehabilitate people? Like, what is my job? Can I do both of those things? Can those things coexist? And which is the priority, right, if they can't coexist? is this something that anyone here, and Mr. Joe Page, just because we haven't heard from you in a minute, I'm going to call on you. Is this something that you've seen come up in your work, whether for yourself or for folks that are on your team, kind of struggling with this? How do I identify my role? How do I hold these two sort of contradictory things together? Oh, we've lost Mr. Joe Page. I'll open this up to anyone else then. Is this a contradiction that you found in your work? Yeah.
So one of the things I can say, Ms. Jessica, that I tried to do to get ahead of that is I started inviting the CO1s into the monthly meetings. To, with myself, deputy wardens, majors, sergeants, and the CO. You have security, you have number supervisors, but I invite the COs to come in as well, because now they feel involved.
Yes.
So with them being involved, you hear different things that may be going on the grounds that you're probably not aware of. Probably other supervisors are not aware of. So that's something that I feel like has helped me over the past couple of years, is really taking that time to speak and, include the CO1s in everything that we do. And I found a disconnect on, we talk about being short, we talk about staff shortages. And one of the things that I came across, it seemed like the staff, the CO that had been here for a while, they had a issue with the ones that was coming in and actually putting forth that extra effort that made it seem like they're not doing their job. So I found an issue there too, where you had staff conflict amongst staff coming in and the CEO that had been here for a while. So that was just different things I found, and found a way to get them to understand, okay, they're coming in, but don't try to bring them down. You need to push them and try to get at the level that they're at, because you've been here longer. So that's some of the things I felt like by bringing CEOs into the meetings that helped me tackle some of those different issues, I say, with the lower ranking staff to my higher ranking staff, to get everybody on the same page. And that's how I end up attacking that a lot better.
Love it. Thank you. Any other thoughts on this sort of dual role, or this, like how do you reconcile what the purpose of corrections is if it feels to be at odds? Any other thoughts on that? We can go to the next slide, please. One of the things that I think really can ease that role ambiguity is making sure that everyone's rallying around a clear vision. And so, as I mentioned, I work for Just Detention International, right? We are a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual abuse in all forms of detention. And our vision is that there is no more sexual abuse in detention, right? And being able to all of us have sort of that common vision of, this is what success looks like to us, right? This is what changes because of our actions. Anytime that we're sort of faced as an organization, or even just like individually in my work, when I'm faced with like a challenging decision, or I'm faced with an issue, I always go back to, okay, how does this help or hurt my vision, our vision, right? And I think that having a clear vision like that everyone rallies around and everyone is like in agreement with, really, really helps alleviate some of that role ambiguity. And your agency, your facility, your department probably has a vision, right? And I'm curious if you go to your facility or your department, your agency's vision in those times of decision making, or those times of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Do you go to the vision? Do you use the vision to help you make decisions? This is for anybody, if that resonates with anybody. Or is the vision just like something that's written down on a website or like on a billboard somewhere that folks don't really go to?
Well, the vision helps on what I'm actually going to put in place. And the vision for like the agency and the vision that I have for my complex, is pretty much, it coincides, but it has a certain purpose and meaning. So if we do something in place, like I say, just like my mission statement here says, the mission of the Riceville complex to utilize an effective management system and providing treatment and services to inmates that promote a successful transition to society, or providing safe environment for employees that encourage staff development and teamwork. So everything that we do is going to center around staff development, teamwork, And also at the same time, make sure we have different programs in place to help the incarcerated be successful as they go into society. So it really ties back into the agency vision statement as well. But I make sure everything we do is centered around a vision statement so I can keep pushing that vision out to the staff, even the ones that come aboard, so they can stay on track, stay the course, and understand to follow the mission and the vision.
Absolutely. And, Miss Lewis, if I can call on you, because earlier you had said something very similar about, just the reality that so many folks are going to leave and go home. And that I guess I'm curious if you also find that vision of like knowing that folks are going to go home and that your role is to help to facilitate that. Does that help in decision making for you when you're faced with something and you're like, okay, how is this going to help that? Yeah.
It absolutely does. I think understanding the vision of the department, because you always want to be in line with the vision of the vision of your department. And ours has recently changed in the last couple of years, which includes ensuring that our population is educated, drug-free, trauma-informed, and able to go back in the community and have the capability to be gainfully employed. And so we do operate intentionally. And I think we have a little more latitude at the Women's Institution to operate in that vein. Just in the last 2 years, we've started offering AA opportunity to get an associate's degree from our local Chaffee College, as well as a bachelor's from Cal State LA. And we just had 4 of our IPs, our incarcerated persons, be accepted into the master's program at Cal State Dominguez Hills. So we celebrate a culture of development and encouragement. Our staff also has started coursework in a program called Being Trauma Informed, because sometimes we don't know how we're being perceived, and that could change the course of an incident or a situation. So we are trying to work in a different vein, following the vision. That vision of our department does really, it kind of opens it up for us to start moving in that direction, right? Because when someone challenges, we can say, hey, we're following the vision of our department.
Yeah.
And, to be honest with you, to be a CEO in California, all you need is a GED and felony free, right? And they're right now at $120,000 a year. So I would welcome them, if this isn't the place for them, find somewhere else that's going to pay you that kind of money with your skill set. So, I mean, I'm just pretty matter of fact with it. We have a mission and an obligation, and I think our department's vision is giving us the latitude to move in that realm.
That's really powerful. Yeah. And I think that trauma-informed piece of the conversation comes up so much. And I think it's important. I think everyone here would agree too, that, being trauma-informed on behalf of the incarcerated population, but then also, acknowledging the trauma of staff, and that so much of, day-to-day corrections work can be very traumatizing to staff. And I think
sometimes we feel like only women have traumas, but men have the same traumas.
Yes.
And it could be even more detrimental because they're not allowed the safe space to really, vocalize that.
Yeah.
They have to be tough, and men don't cry. So they have an even tougher time acknowledging those traumas. So I think educating the staff on how even a man's voice, sometimes with a woman who's been assaulted, or that voice and that strong, loud voice is triggering to them. And just being mindful of your volume and your demeanor, or stepping back and not being too proud to say, you know what, let me call my female counterpart in to kind of diffuse this situation, because maybe as a male I'm triggering. I think that's what we're working on, and actually our staff is embracing it.
Great.
And they are learning, and as they see success, they're implementing more. So I think there is a fear always of change and new things, but when you see success, then you start trying it more and more. So we look forward to great things in the future for our institution and the department.
Thank you. I think that's a great segue to the next slide. I think one of the things that you mentioned is that celebrating successes is a really important part of navigating those kinds of internal barriers, those kinds of staff buy-in issues. And I think that celebrating successes is like an antidote to cynicism, right? Because if you're cynical and nothing's going to work and no one's ever going to rehabilitate and no one's ever going to be, be successful, if you're able to find those moments, whether they're big moments like, folks getting into master's programs, or even like smaller moments like, whatever they may be, maybe someone that used to have a huge disciplinary record has gone 6 months without, an infraction. Even a celebration of that success, I think, is a really, really important part of navigating those internal resistances that we've talked about. And I'm wondering if anyone else has any other examples or any other thoughts around how they've navigated some of those internal barriers that come from the inside of the facility. Any thoughts on that?
For me, I think one of the biggest things is the change. It's really hard for a lot of the staff, and especially when you're trying to do more stuff that actually has been proven to be effective. And we have a lot of staff that have been working for corrections for many, many years, and changing from prisons to corrections, and everything we do now is different. I think it's really, really hard to try to work on that barrier to change for the staff. But I think that educating them and kind of explaining them the benefits of actually, how it's actually easier for them and safer for them by having more programming, by targeting the trauma, by providing more resources, by doing a lot of the stuff. So let me share with you guys, this is the first time in the state of Nevada that we're actually going to be doing a job fair inside of a facility. And we are actually going to have resources and community partners from the community come into the facility to be part of this job fair. The individuals that are going to be involved in this program is going to be individuals that are going to be releasing within the next 6 months. We're going to be teaching them how to submit resumes, and they're going to be actually going to have those companies here talking to those individuals. So this is huge because we've never done anything like this before. So what I've been doing, I've been going around talking to officers and educating them on the benefits of that, to get their buy-in. And actually, I've been pretty successful at that right now. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you so much. I think that's great. And I know that's something I keep seeing that idea kind of pop up in a lot of other facilities that, that we work with, where they're bringing in a lot more outside resources, whether that's, like emotional support resources, advocacy work, whether it's job fair type stuff. I think another piece of the conversation I haven't touched on yet that comes up a lot when I talk with corrections officials is the sort of disconnect between the facility and the community, right? Like those walls are there, the things don't come from one side or the other very frequently, and that it can be really easy to feel disconnected, whether you're a staff, but I think especially if you're, an incarcerated person, to feel disconnected, right, from what's happening outside. I think there's a lot of power in bringing in those community resources, not just for the incarcerated population, but for staff as well. I think there's a lot of power in that. So kudos. I hope that is successful for you. Next slide, please. Okay. And then there's also the external barriers or the external resistance that comes. And this is the stuff that is a little bit more challenging, right, to navigate, because this is the stuff that's top down, right? So we talked about budgetary issues, resource limitations, political pressures, whatever those pressures may be, public perception of your facility, of corrections overall, of whatever it is. And I think also evolving expectations, right? I think it's fair to say that what the public expects of corrections has changed and has evolved, right? And then, of course, you have different visions and different priorities, right? You might have someone, at the headquarters level who is really focused on a particular program or a particular something or other, and maybe it's at odds or just different than what you want to focus on, right, at your facility. Do these sorts of external barriers resonate with folks? Is this, am I right on the money here with like what that experience is like, and how do you navigate those? Like how do you navigate when the people above you are telling you like this is the reality? How do you navigate? good, bad, or otherwise.
Well, it's difficult because with a lot of initiatives that we're using around the world in corrections, it's coming from people that, as a coworker of mine would say, they haven't seen a picture of a prison up close. I think Earl knows who I'm talking about. I've seen that, but at the same time, we have to. And a lot of the things that I can honestly say we have lost the freedom with and doing is because people abuse them. But when people have abused them, instead of there still being a fighting force to reel it in, bring it in a little bit, and still have the certain controls, the quick solution is just do away with all of it. As much as I am, like, one of the things we're dealing with now is the restrictive housing initiatives. There are some states that are making a push to not have a lockup or a hold, as you would call it. But at the same time, I understand that. I'm not arguing against that, but at the same time, there are people in the prison that are just genuinely bad people. There are people in prison that victimize other people. There are people that will just sexually do things to other people. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are people on this earth that cannot live in society, so they have to go to the prison. Then once in the prison, they can't be with anyone else, or they will continue to victimize while they're on this earth. And I believe, and that's one of the more current ones that I see. We have gotten so accustomed to, well, what is it doing to them mentally? Yes, this is true. This is true. But we forget that part of our duty is to also protect those that are incarcerated. Because when you sign for your timesheet, it doesn't say, oh, you're going to California Department of Corrections for 40 years and you're going to be violated sexually, mentally, spiritually by same gender offenders for the duration of your time. That's the bonuses that we didn't put in your time. No, they didn't. And the more violence you have with that, the more violence you have with traditional violence. Like, okay, I want to keep who I am as a person. I have to kill someone to do this. And then you end up, I think it's kind of doing a slow thing, trying to send us backwards to the days of big prison riots and mass takeovers, like Earl was in Attica, I think it was, places like that. You end up back with things like that. But because we're losing, in essence, a sense of control because some people have made mistakes. And I just hope that as things continue to grow or scale back, that they realize that as long as you're doing a meaningful classification hearing of this individual, you're letting them know why they are placed in restrictive housing. You are seeing them every 7 days and every 30 days, and you're reviewing them. You're not leaving anybody locked up for 2 or 3 years in a cell saying they're being seen once a year, and that's bullcrap. If you're, as long as you're not treating people like that, you owe it, because we're in a servant position. So you still owe it to the people that you serve that are incarcerated for them to feel safe. Because the better they feel safe, the more your staff is going to feel safe.
Yeah.
Because who are they going to hit or commit battery against to get away from that pressure? Not the other offender in the cell, because they're scared of him. He's got a shank. He's going to kill them. They're going to jump on your officer. So that's one of the outside external barriers that ties in, that just resonates with me. And I love to talk to the lobbyists when I'm around DC and these other areas that are lobbying and getting paid so much an hour to push the narrative of no one should be locked up while locked up. Well, I would pay to see you sit down there in that barracks of 50 to 70 guys and hold that key and watch this guy bust this other guy's head open over a soup or something, and then say Timmy gets a timeout. Timmy's serving 3 life sentences, but Timmy gets a timeout. It doesn't work like that. So that bothers me, and I'll talk with them at the bar, at the restaurant, and I'll talk to them till I help them understand that we're trying to run a safe institution, and without lockup beds, we're just locking people up. We're housing them together. They're not safe. We're endangering them. So I will talk about that until we get some federal stuff kind of loosened up on that. But That is one of my pet peeves, these
Yeah.
external barriers.
Yeah. And there's a couple things that you said that really resonated with me. One, I just want to like acknowledge, what you said about, the responsibility that you have to other incarcerated people for their safety also. But I think also, the other piece around just talking with folks in the community or lobbyists or whoever, I think it's really easy to approach it as an adversarial conversation, right? Like we're up against each other. You want this and you want this, and we're never going to agree and blah, blah, blah. And I think there's so much power in just having those conversations. I mean, I feel like I can speak for myself as someone who has not worked in correction and came to this work, as an advocate on behalf of incarcerated people. Just being able to be a part of these conversations has created um, within me a lot more understanding of the nuance and the challenges. And that only happens when you're able to connect with the people that are doing that work in this kind of way. But if you're connecting in this kind of way, you're not much is going to get accomplished, right? Not much. No one's going to convince anyone that they're wrong. But if you can, again, all agree on that vision of, being removed from your community is the punishment, right? Once you get there, the punishment is not to continue to be violated or to have violence done against you or whatever, right? If we're all able to agree that like folks deserve to live and work in safety, that's a great place to start rather than, we disagree on things. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on external barriers and how you've navigated them, or any particular challenges that have come up when you're trying to work with, whether it's the community or whether it's politicians or whether it's your administration level? Any other thoughts on that? Move on to the next slide. Um, this kind of goes back to the knowing your why. And I think this is where, we have our sort of personal missions, our personal passions, the reason for doing this work. And I think this is another place where folks that do the kind of work that I do, advocacy work and corrections folks, can really agree on a lot of things, that we find ourselves right there in the middle, right? That this is work that you love, this is work that you're good at. The world needs it. And I can't say that enough. The world needs it. And if you can make a living off of it, like, wow, how lucky, right? Are we to be able to be doing that, to be able to find our purpose. And that's the message I want to leave with you all as we start to wrap things up. That, finding your purpose in this work is such a huge part of, navigating these barriers that we've talked about. Is knowing yourself and your reason why, is one of the first barriers to remove, right? And it sounds like we've gotten there for so many folks. The next slide here has a couple links to some of the resources that we've shared. These are going to get emailed out to folks. You'll get an email with these, including the video. I do want to say too that, we're always like looking for folks to get involved with our work. Next slide, please. Our contact information is right here. If you want to check out our website, we have recordings of past summits that we've done. We did one in January on hope in corrections, which is, I think, very much related to what we've talked about today. So I would encourage you to go forth and take a look at that. You can direct any questions to this email address right here, or you can reach out to me directly. I'll put my email into the chat one more time here. And then next slide, please. We have our next summit coming up on June 20th. And again, these will be sent to you, so you'll get the link to register to that. If you are not signed up for our mailing list, I would really, really encourage you to go ahead and do that. We do not blow up your inboxes. We send one email a month, maybe another one if we have an event coming up, or something that we want to let folks know about. And also, if there's work that you're doing that you want to showcase, let us know, because we're always looking for like guest presenters or folks that are doing really exciting things to share their experiences with us. And then the next slide, please. This is really short notice, but if you happen to be going to the NAS conference coming up at the end of the month, we're going to be there. I'm going to be there. I know Joe Page is going to be there. The Great Wardens Project is presenting on that Tuesday. The website is right there in the chat as well. If you're able to join, I would love to see you there. Please don't, feel weird about coming up to me and introducing yourself. I want to meet you. If you're there, I want to meet you. And then finally, once this meeting ends, a really, really short evaluation is going to pop up. And I mean it short, like 3 or 4 questions. Please take the time if you can to just share your thoughts. Let me know how this was, whether you'd be interested in coming back for another one, that kind of thing. Like I said, all the work that we're doing is really informed by what corrections leaders are telling us. So tell us some stuff so that we can present stuff that's really meaningful for you all. I don't know if anyone has any other like final thoughts or final. Yes, okay, go for it.
In closing, all of you are familiar with NIL deals, name, image, and likeness for college athletes, right? Well, that's what the Great Wardens Project is for us. For the Great Wardens Project, all of us wardens and superintendents were pretty much under the confines of the NCAA. Let that paraphrase sink in. Now we have a forum to where you're non-judged. You can ask a question. You can make contacts. And you can go bolder. You can be comfortable in saying, I really want to do this, but the state is against it. Like Earl said, I'm dealing with the same thing he's dealing with. And we confidently talk about it, but we can talk about it amongst this cohort and it's not judged because we both think transformative, but we're in a place that's how we did it since 1975. And it makes it hard. You're questioned because you're trying to see forward. You're questioned if, well, why do you want to do that? If you ask the question why, is a lot of you are in that position. If you ask why, you're not asking in a devious demeanor. You're just asking for understanding of why do we do it this way. But the old heads, as you would call it, take that as young folks is always challenging, or what's wrong with the way it's always been. Well, if we're going 15 miles around the block to get to this junction, they just built a new road that takes 2 minutes right here. Why are we still going 15 miles around the block? Because we've been doing that for 40 years. How about we just walk down this new trail and still accomplish the same thing, but have more time to do more things, get more things done? So I just want all you to put into this because what you put in is what we're gonna get out of it. You know, all of y'all are here. All of you are here because you want to continue to grow. We're trying to help you grow. We're trying to keep growing ourselves, but it's not going to grow if. That's why at times I try to get y'all going, get you to say stuff because you will make your groups, you will make the cohorts, you will make these summits. Everybody in there because it's one of those things where if you ever saw that somebody can offer you business advice for free, a billionaire, nobody will show up. They can charge $20 a head and it'll be a full house. Think about that. This is free. Now, I mean, do we need to start charging $9.99 subscription to Great Wardens Project nonprofit? I mean, maybe we'll do it that. Everybody will get on here with 15 questions then, won't they? I'm just saying, we have a weird way as humans of getting what we know we need help with out there. So y'all think about that for the next summit. I'm glad we're here to help y'all, okay?
Thank you so much. I think that was, you hit it right on the head. Like, and I want to encourage you too, like if you know, Ms. Lewis, I saw your comment in the chat and I appreciate that. Thank you. If you want to let your colleagues know, like to show up to the next one, you know, I mean, I would love it. Because, you know, I think that one of the things I hear a lot too is that there's an acknowledgement that this type of space is needed and really important. And for a lot of really valid reasons, folks don't always show up. You know, I know Mr. Page, you had to step away for a minute because of an emergency. That's just the life of, you know, being in corrections. I understand that. And at the same time, like I think the more people know about the resources that are available, the more people will access them. So feel free to like forward our stuff to any of your colleagues that you think might be interested. Otherwise, we are done for today. I want to thank you all so much for your participation, for joining us, for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I really hope to see you all next time in June. And again, if you have any questions or need anything else or want to connect with any of us, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.